Today is August 24th, 2025. We look back at a year that has profoundly tested the very soul of India. The world's largest democracy went to the polls in 2024, a monumental exercise in civic participation. Yet for many of India's 200 million Muslims, this period was marked not by celebration, but by a deepening sense of anxiety and exclusion. The air was thick with tension, fueled by divisive political rhetoric and a series of state actions that seemed to target one community specifically. This essay is an attempt to understand what life has become like for many Muslim citizens in India today, a life lived under the shadow of fear and uncertainty. We will explore the troubling events that unfolded during the election and beyond. These are not isolated incidents, but part of a larger, more disturbing pattern. We will hear from people who were allegedly attacked simply for trying to exercise their right to vote. We will examine the policy of bulldozer justice, where homes, shops, and even places of worship are demolished without the due process guaranteed by the Constitution. These are not just news headlines, they are the lived realities of families who have lost everything, their security and their sense of belonging shattered overnight in the country they call home. This is a story about personal loss and a nation's collective challenge. It is about policies like the Citizenship Amendment Act, which for the first time introduced religion as a criterion for Indian citizenship. It is about the bans on the hijab in classrooms, which forced young women to choose between their faith and their education. These are not just abstract legal debates. They have real, tangible consequences on the daily lives of millions, making them feel like outsiders in their own land, their patriotism constantly questioned, and their identity scrutinized with suspicion. Through it all, we must ask ourselves a fundamental question. What do these events mean for the fabric of Indian democracy? A democracy is measured not just by the act of voting, but by the safety, dignity, and equal rights afforded to every single one of its citizens, especially its minorities. When a significant portion of the population lives in fear, when their homes can be razed and their right to vote suppressed, the democratic promise begins to fray. This is a deep dive into the communal tensions that define 2024, a look at the personal stories behind the politics, and a reflection on what it means for the future of India. The 2024 general election should have been a vibrant display of India's democratic spirit. For many Muslim voters, however, it became a day of intimidation and violence. In places like Sambal in Uttar Pradesh, a state with a large Muslim population, the simple act of going to vote turned into a frightening ordeal. Eyewitnesses reported that police forces arrived in large numbers at polling stations in predominantly Muslim neighborhoods. Instead of protecting voters, they were accused of attacking them. People waiting in line, holding their voter slips and official Aadhaar identity cards, were suddenly faced with chaos and aggression from those meant to ensure order. Shane Alam, a voter from Sambal, shared a harrowing account of that day. He said that police officers began snatching and tearing up their identity documents, the very papers that proved their right to participate in the election. He described how officers beat men and women with batons, their blows landing indiscriminately on the crowd. According to Shane, the police accused them of trying to cast fraudulent votes, a serious allegation with no immediate proof. He was severely beaten himself. For him and many others, the message was painfully clear. Their presence was not welcome, and their votes were not wanted. These were not isolated events confined to a single town. Similar reports of police harassment and attacks on Muslim voters emerged from other areas in Uttar Pradesh. The pattern seemed consistent. In communities where the opposition was expected to do well, often with the support of Muslim voters, a heavy police presence and sudden crackdowns created an atmosphere of fear. The intention, as many victims believed, was to suppress voter turnout. It was a strategy designed to scare people away from the polling booths, to silence their voices before they could even be counted in the ballot box. The official response to these serious allegations was muted. The Uttar Pradesh police stated that it would look into the claims of violence and voter suppression. However, as weeks turned into months, victims and rights groups reported that no meaningful investigation had begun. This lack of accountability only deepened the community's sense of vulnerability. It sent a chilling message that the state machinery could be used to intimidate a specific segment of the population during the most sacred exercise of a democracy, and there would be little to no consequence for those responsible for the violence. In recent years, a new and terrifying term has entered the Indian lexicon: bulldozer justice. This phrase describes a punitive state policy, most common in BJP-ruled states like Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. Under this practice, the homes and businesses of individuals, overwhelmingly Muslim, who are merely accused of a crime, are demolished by bulldozers. This action is often carried out swiftly, without the fair legal process, trial, or conviction that a democracy promises its citizens. The bulldozer has become a potent symbol of state power, capable of erasing a family's entire existence in a matter of hours. This form of collective punishment is often justified by officials as a necessary action against illegal encroachments or as a deterrent to crime. However, critics and human rights organizations point to a glaring bias. The demolitions almost always follow a communal clash or a protest, and the properties targeted overwhelmingly belong to Muslims. An Amnesty International report highlighted that in just a 10-month period, authorities demolished at least 128 properties in this manner. The speed and selectivity of these actions have led many to believe that the true purpose is not law enforcement, but the economic and social subjugation of the Muslim community. The devastating impact of bulldozer justice goes far beyond the loss of a physical structure. For a family, a home is not just bricks and mortar. It is a lifetime of savings, a place of memories, and a source of security for future generations. A shop is not just a business. It is a family's livelihood, the means to put food on the table and send children to school. When a bulldozer reduces these to rubble, it destroys a family's economic foundation and their hope for the future. The emotional toll is immeasurable, leaving people homeless, jobless, and traumatized overnight. This practice has drawn sharp criticism from the judiciary itself, raising fundamental questions about the rule of law. In August 2023, the Punjab and Haryana High Court made a powerful observation regarding demolitions in Haryana's new district. The court questioned whether the state's targeted campaign, which followed communal violence, was an exercise in ethnic cleansing. This judicial intervention highlighted the grave concern that bulldozer justice is not about justice at all. Instead, it appears to be a tool for disempowering and punishing a minority community, bypassing the courts and delivering a verdict with a bulldozer blade. Behind the political debates and policy names are real people whose lives have been irrevocably broken. Take the story of Gohar Ali from Haldwani, a town in the state of Uttarakhand. In February 2024, his life was shattered. Protests had erupted over the demolition of a local mosque and a religious school. In the chaos that followed, police opened fire on the crowds. Gohar's 17-year-old son, Haris, was caught in the violence. He was struck in the head by a bullet. Gohar found his son bleeding, but still alive, a glimmer of hope in a moment of pure terror. Gohar's frantic efforts to save his son were thwarted at every turn. He tried to rush Haris to the nearest hospital, but the roads were blocked by police. He could hear the continuous sound of gunfire, making it impossible to move. By the time he could find a way through, it was too late. Haris was gone. In the aftermath, Gohar Ali's pain was compounded by a deafening silence from the authorities. He says no government official ever contacted his family. No one took responsibility. No one offered an explanation or an apology for the death of his teenage son. His grief was his alone to bear. The tragedy did not end with Haris's death. In the days following the riots, a wave of fear swept through Haldwani's Muslim neighborhoods. Gohar Ali says many Muslim-owned homes and businesses were targeted. The sense of safety that once existed was completely gone. Fearing for their lives, hundreds of Muslim families, including Gohar's, packed what little they could and fled the city. They became refugees in their own country, driven from their homes not by a natural disaster, but by man-made violence and the terror it left in its wake. Even after returning to Haldwani to try and earn a living, Gohar Ali speaks of a city transformed. He describes an atmosphere filled with a lot of terror. People are afraid to speak to one another, their conversations hushed and their interactions strained. The social fabric that once bound the community together has been torn apart. Gohar Ali's story is not just one of personal loss. It is a testament to the lasting trauma inflicted upon an entire community. It shows how targeted violence crushes not only lives and property, but also the trust and social harmony that are essential for any society to function. The campaign of demolition has not been limited to homes and shops. It has extended to the very heart of the Muslim community's spiritual life, its mosques and shrines. These are not just places of prayer, they are centers of community, heritage, and identity, often standing for centuries as symbols of a shared history. In 2024 alone, the BJP government in Uttarakhand demolished at least 5 Muslim shrines and 3 mosques across different states. Each demolition sent a clear and painful message that the religious heritage of Muslims was not valued and could be erased at will. One particularly poignant example is the destruction of a nearly 400-year-old Muslim shrine in Ramnagar, Uttarakhand. Government officials claim the structure encroached on a protected forest reserve, a justification used to bring in the bulldozers. Ashraf Ali, the shrine's caretaker, tells a different story. He says his family received no prior notice, no official letter, no opportunity to present their case in court. They woke up one day to find the machines already at work, tearing down a piece of their family's history and a sacred site for the entire community. During the demolition in Ramnagar, the destruction was not just physical. Ashraf Ali watched in horror as religious books, including copies of the Quran, were buried and destroyed under the debris. This act of desecration was deeply painful for the community. What made the loss even more significant was that the shrine was a place of syncretic culture. It was visited not only by Muslims, but also by many local Hindus, who came to offer their prayers and seek blessings. Its destruction was not just an attack on one faith, but an assault on a shared tradition of peaceful coexistence that had endured for generations. The official rationale for these demolitions often revolves around legalities, like land encroachment. However, the selective nature of these actions raises serious doubts. Many other unauthorized structures belonging to different communities often remain untouched, while mosques and shrines are singled out. This selective application of the law suggests that the motive is not administrative, but ideological. It is seen as part of a broader political project to assert a majoritarian identity over the nation's landscape, rewriting history by erasing the physical symbols of its pluralistic past, and making Muslims feel that their faith has no place in the new India. Beyond the immediate violence of bulldozers and batons, a series of laws and policies have systematically eroded the rights and security of Indian Muslims. The most controversial of these is the Citizenship Amendment Act, or CAA, passed by Parliament in December 2019 and officially implemented in March 2024. This law has fundamentally altered the secular nature of Indian citizenship. The CAA offers a fast track to citizenship for non-Muslim minorities, specifically Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis, and Christians, who fled from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. For the first time, religion has become a criterion for becoming an Indian citizen. The exclusion of Muslims from this list is glaring and deliberate. The government argues that these 3 countries are Muslim majority, so Muslims cannot be persecuted minorities there. However, this ignores the persecution of minority Muslim sects like Shias and Ahmadis in those nations. For Indian Muslims, the CAA is deeply alarming, especially when viewed alongside the government's proposal for a National Register of Citizens, or NRC. They fear that if an NRC is implemented nationwide, those who cannot produce legacy documents to prove their ancestry could be rendered stateless. Under the CAA, non-Muslims in that situation would have a pathway back to citizenship, but Muslims would not. Another area where policy has directly impacted the daily lives of Muslims is education. In the southern state of Karnataka, when it was governed by the BJP, schools and colleges were permitted to ban the hijab, the headscarf worn by many Muslim women. This policy forced thousands of young women and girls into an impossible choice: either remove their hijab and compromise a tenet of their faith, or give up their education. The ban sparked widespread protests and a heated national debate about religious freedom, women's rights, and the role of religious attire in public institutions. For the students affected, it was a direct barrier to their future. These policies are part of a larger pattern. In August 2019, the government abrogated Article 370 of the Constitution, revoking the special autonomous status of Jammu and Kashmir, India's only Muslim-majority state. The region was placed under a severe lockdown, with political leaders arrested and communication lines severed for months. While the government presented this as a move for national integration and development, For many, it was seen as a demographic project to alter the character of the region. Together, the CAA, hijab bans, and the changes in Kashmir have created a legal framework that makes many Muslims feel like second-class citizens in their own country. The climate of fear and violence against Muslims is not happening in a vacuum. It is being actively cultivated and inflamed by the words of powerful political leaders. During the 2024 election campaign, the rhetoric reached a new and dangerous low. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his campaign speeches, repeatedly referred to India's Muslim population using charged and derogatory terms. He called them infiltrators and accused them of having more children. He claimed that the opposition party planned to seize the nation's wealth and redistribute it to Muslims, a statement designed to stoke fear and resentment among the Hindu majority. This dehumanizing language was echoed by other prominent leaders within the ruling BJP. Yogi Adityanath, the influential chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, amplified this narrative. He publicly claimed that the opposition, if elected, would give people's property away to infiltrators from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and to Rohingya Muslims. This rhetoric deliberately conflates Indian Muslims, who are citizens by birth, with foreign migrants and refugees. It paints an entire community as a foreign threat, a disloyal other that is plotting to take over the country and its resources from the rightful Hindu population. These are not just words. This type of hate speech has real-world consequences. It normalizes prejudice and gives social sanction to discrimination and violence. When leaders at the highest level of government use such language, it signals to their followers and to state agencies that hostility towards Muslims is acceptable, even patriotic. Conspiracy theories like love jihad, which falsely accuses Muslim men of luring Hindu women into marriage to convert them, and land jihad, which claims Muslims are systematically buying property to alter demographics, have been mainstreamed by senior politicians, leading to vigilante violence and social boycotts against the community. The impact of this rhetoric on the social fabric is devastating. Between 2019 and 2024, data shows a sharp rise in communal violence. Over 210 Hindu-Muslim clashes were recorded, with more than two-thirds of the violence specifically targeting Muslim civilians and their properties. The deadliest of these was the February 2020 riot in Delhi, which erupted after protests against the CAA. Over 50 people were killed, the majority of them Muslims. The violence on the streets is a direct reflection of the poison being spread from political pulpits, a stark reminder that words have the power to incite hatred and tear a nation apart. For millions of Muslims across India, the combination of discriminatory policies, violent attacks, and hateful rhetoric has created a pervasive climate of fear. This is not an abstract political issue. It is the lived, daily reality that shapes their choices and interactions. People feel a constant need to be careful about what they say, where they go, and even what they wear. The sense of being watched, judged, and suspected has become a heavy psychological burden. A simple act like wearing a skull cap or a hijab, once a normal expression of faith, can now feel like an act of defiance that might invite hostility. The fear is tangible in communities that have experienced violence firsthand. Gohar Ali, the father who lost his son in Haldwani, speaks of the terror that now hangs over his city. He says people are afraid to speak openly, even to their neighbors. The trust that once existed between communities has been replaced by suspicion. Families are afraid to let their children play outside late in the evening. Business owners worry that their shops could be the next targets of a mob or a bulldozer. This constant state of anxiety affects mental health, damages social bonds, and prevents people from living full, free lives. This climate of intimidation has also led to a historic low in Muslim political representation. In the 2024 parliament, the number of elected Muslim representatives is one of the lowest in India's history. This is a direct consequence of the political marginalization of the community. When major political parties are hesitant to field Muslim candidates for fear of a majoritarian backlash, and when Muslim voters themselves are intimidated at the polls, their voice in the halls of power is diminished. This lack of representation means their concerns, their fears, and their needs are less likely to be addressed in national policymaking. Ultimately, this environment forces people into a state of constant defensiveness. They feel compelled to repeatedly prove their loyalty to a country where their families have lived for generations. Every festival, every cricket match, every political event becomes a test of their patriotism. This daily struggle to be seen as equal citizens is exhausting and demoralizing. It chips away at their sense of belonging and their faith in the promise of a secular, inclusive India. For many, life has become a tightrope walk, a careful balancing act to survive in a nation that increasingly feels hostile to their very presence. The events of the past year have brought India to a critical juncture, forcing a difficult national conversation about the health and future of its democracy. A democracy is more than just the sum of its elections. It is a promise of equality, liberty, and justice for all its citizens. When a minority community of 200 million people is systematically made to feel unsafe, disenfranchised, and unwelcome, that promise is broken. The targeted intimidation of Muslim voters, the extrajudicial demolition of their homes and sacred sites, and the enactment of discriminatory laws are not just attacks on a single community, they are an assault on the foundational principles of the Indian Constitution. The turmoil of 2024 has revealed deep fractures in India's social fabric. The normalization of hate speech from political leaders has poisoned public discourse and created a permissive environment for violence. This has eroded the bonds of trust and coexistence between Hindus and Muslims that have been woven over centuries. While the 2024 election results showed some pushback against the ruling party's divisive agenda, particularly in states with large Muslim populations, the underlying ideology of religious nationalism remains a powerful force. The path to healing and reconciliation will be long and arduous, requiring a concerted effort to rebuild trust and reaffirm secular values. For India's Muslim citizens, the future feels deeply uncertain. They are caught between their profound attachment to their homeland and the growing fear that their country is turning against them. Their daily lives are a testament to resilience, but they are also marked by a constant struggle for safety, dignity, and basic rights. The fight is not just for their own community, but for the very idea of India as a pluralistic and tolerant nation. Their fate is inextricably linked to the fate of Indian democracy itself. A country cannot remain a true democracy if it treats a significant portion of its own people as an internal enemy. The road ahead depends on the choices that India as a nation makes now. It requires the judiciary to stand firm as a guardian of constitutional rights. It requires civil society and the media to speak truth to power and hold leaders accountable. Most importantly, it requires a political discourse that chooses unity over division, empathy over hatred, and constitutional morality over majoritarian might. The challenge is to restore faith in the democratic process and ensure that every Indian, regardless of their religion, can live without fear and participate fully in the life of the nation. The soul of India hangs in the balance.